So I'm just going to go straight on to the assessment panel, and that's really segs the student panel, and all those sort of differing views on assessment and online assessment is a really nice intro into this final panel, where we're going to be looking at assessment from a number of different points of view. And I'm going to hand over straight away to Lee Edwards from the Department of Media and Communications, who's going to share with us a really exciting new course initiative at LSE, which is also something that Dilly has been very keen to champion during her time at LSE. So over to you, Lee.
Thanks, Claire, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me at the event. It looks great. I've only just been able to join because of other meetings, but I'm looking forward to seeing some of the follow-ups. So the Showcase portfolio is, the course itself is a final year half unit optional course that will be available to students across the school as long as programme directors put it on their set of options. And the idea of the Showcase portfolio is that it allows students to develop knowledge and expertise in theory and practice of the media and communications industries, and then combine that with the passion that they have for their subject and also their personal interests. So really they're bringing to bear kind of new theoretical knowledge and understanding of how media and comms works in society, into their own kind of LSE journey, their academic and personal journey over the time that they've been at the LSE. And the culmination of that is a personal portfolio, which they develop in the second half of the year. So what we really want students to have at the end of this is a critical understanding of those industries, those media and comms industries and their power, but also an understanding of how you can use those industries to communicate and reflect on your own personal identity in society, how those what your position is, and how audiences that you are trying to reach, or that you might try to reach through your future career, for example, might relate to you because of the ways you communicate. So there's the kind of a real emphasis on the power of communication per se, and the way that it currently operates, the way that we're all embedded in it, and the way that then those students might then use it. So they build up to the portfolio through a first term in Michaelmas term of fairly standard lectures and seminars. Those are kind of first theoretically driven around our understanding of media industries and their power and influence. And in the second half, we move to a focus on the theories and practices of strategic communication. So more kind of the PR end of things, if you like, the promotional end of things. And those two elements bring together media and comms theory and practice so that the students themselves can start to engage with how these things work around them, how they are involved in them on a day-to-day basis. And at the end of Michaelmas term, their first part of the portfolio is submitted as a reflective exercise. And what we want them to do with that is to take the Michaelmas term content that they've had, and they do reflective writings each week for the Michaelmas term, pull those writings together in a single piece of work that allows them to start to think about their understanding of media and comms industries, what those industries might mean for them as young people going into the rest of their lives, and how they might then start to use those capabilities and capacities of those industries for their own purposes. And then in Lent term, there are a series of one-on-one tutorials with graduate teaching assistants who then support the students in literally developing a portfolio of communicative tools. And that portfolio can be a whole range of different things. So you might have a blog post, you might have a podcast, you might build a website, you might do an animation that you then run on YouTube, you might just do something more straightforward and run a seminar or an event. It really is up to the students to determine how they want to use these capabilities of media and communications, reflect on them in relation to their course, whether that's accounting or management or marketing or sociology, and then target a specific audience with a set of communications information that they can then use to communicate their own passion about their subject, or perhaps the ways in which their experience at LSE has changed the ways that they see the world around them. And so the challenge in the Showcase portfolio is to have them use communications tools effectively in a targeted way, understand the power that they have when they use those tools, and be able to reflect on the impact that communication might have as a result of the ways that they are articulating, literally writing narratives, producing images, and positioning themselves in relation to others through that portfolio work. So it's a bit different to what LSE normally does, I think, partly because it's not a normative kind of mode of assessment. It's going to be a different kind of assessment for the portfolio. It's multimedia, and we have a lot of support from Eden Digital to help the students develop those digital tools if they want to. And we have a platform that we're going to use to do that. But that's kind of a quick summary, if you like, of what the portfolio is about. And I'm very happy to answer questions about it if people would like to find out a bit more.
Thank you, Lee. That was great. Because we're reasonably short of, I mean, it's a really exciting development at LSE, and we hope many, well, initially it'll be limited, but I hope that, you know, we look forward to students, undergraduates across the school in all sorts of different departments taking up the opportunity to take this course. I think because we're short of time, what we're going to encourage people to do is ask questions to Lee in the chat, and then Lee can respond to them online. She's got to pop off in not too long a period of time to another event, so it's great that you're able to fit us in, but I think it gives you more information will be being sent around the school shortly, first to faculty and then in due course in Lent term to students, so you can find out more about the new course and the showcase portfolios. So I'm going to hand over now to Chris Hunt and Miriam Tresh from the Department of Psychological and Behavioural Science, and they're going to be talking about implementing and combining novel assessments. Welcome, Miriam and Chris, and thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, guys. Hopefully you can all see my screen and hear me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So Miriam and I are going to talk a little bit about implementing and combining kind of different assessments. One of the assessments in this is overtly digital, and the other one is also kind of digital, but in a less obvious way. To introduce myself, I'm Chris, I'm the undergraduate program manager, and Miriam is one of the assistant profs in the department. This is very much a work in progress, and it's against PB 300, which is our advances in psychological and behavioural science. It's probably worthwhile giving you a little bit of context about this course and kind of where we're at with it already. PB 300 is a full unit course. It comes in the final year of the BSc in Psychological and Behavioural Science. There's heavy integration across the programme and with the courses, and both the teaching and the assessments is connected with other teaching and assessment in other courses in lots of ways. So we have lots of horizontal integration within each of the years, and we have lots of vertical integration across each of the years. The assessment the students have gone through to date in year 1 and year 2 of the programme is varied and very real world focused, along with the programme more generally. It helps students to develop skills alongside us, allowing us to assess the learning, and the skills aspect of our assessments is quite important. It's a key part of our accreditation from the British Psychological Society. There's also a really necessary focus on ethics, particularly given it's a psychology programme. Teaching in PB 300 is a summation of the kind of the programme. Michaelmas will see the faculty from the department teaching on applications of psychology and behavioural science around the world, and kind of joining the dots from the year 1 and year 2 courses. And Lent term is scheduled to see lots of speakers from outside the department, being even more real world in their focus. And then the classes take these applications kind of back to the theory. So it's kind of spun on its head from a lot of traditional courses. We wanted the assessments in PB 300 to kind of reflect those things. We wanted it to cap off the programme. We wanted to allow students to demonstrate their skills, and we wanted it to be engaging. The other kind of bit of background to this is that Dilly very kindly spoke at our SSLC in 2019 and introduced the concept of showcase portfolios to our students then, and got them really quite excited about this. And we did quite a wide-ranging consultation on what year 3 was going to look like in lots of different ways, and introduced that as well. So there was quite a heavy emphasis on student partnership in how we got here. So the model that we're working towards is having 2 assessments, but we're really considering it as one piece of work or one process. As a staff team, we were really keen for it to be fun, and we were particularly keen not to overly assess our students. The students are really heavily assessed in year 2. Again, this is kind of a function of our accreditation. We have to do lots of necessary assessment around key parts of the curriculum. So we didn't want to go overboard with the work in year 3 where we could avoid it. So showcase portfolios were really firmly on the agenda, but we wanted to kind of deliver it as part of the course. And we wanted to cap off the whole of the kind of program with a simulation type assessment. That seemed really appropriate to what we were doing. But during our conversations in implementing these, it became really clear that the Showcase portfolio needed to have a purpose, which was the case for lots of our other assessments. So in PB 101, for example, our students produce a blog, which is all about informing a lay audience about a key area of psychology. In PB 200, the students develop a podcast, which again is about informing a lay audience about a key area of biological psychology, for example. And we needed to work out what the purpose of the Showcase portfolio was going to be. And the answer was actually it would form, in its first instance, or its kind of first iteration, the Showcase portfolio will form part of a job application for the student to take part in the application. So students will produce this portfolio to apply for a position in a fictitious organisation, which will be the basis of the simulation assessment. So in advance, they'll get some information about it, and they will produce their portfolio in order to apply for that simulation. So that's kind of how the whole thing integrates and connects together as one piece of work within that course. But alongside it all, and this is kind of why I'm here, we needed to make sure that it was logistically deliverable. It was wonderful having these ideas, but we needed to make sure that they were actually going to work. So I'm going to hand over to Miriam, who's going to talk through the details of these two parts of this kind of single assessment process.
Great, thank you, Chris. So as Chris has said, this is two parts, but they very much are integrated. I'm not going to spend too much time focus on kind of the Showcase portfolio in depth, because I think Lee really talked a lot about those. But I think one point that Lee mentioned was around kind of this idea of targeting a specific audience, right? And that's really what our students are doing. The aim here, as Chris said, is that students will showcase a range of work that they've produced over their time on the program with us, and the aim then is for them to demonstrate their suitability for a position in this fictitious organization that will create. So they're applying for a job with us and they're using the Showcase portfolio to do that. So the idea here is that they're selecting artifacts to showcase, and we kind of are setting some parameters there. So we're suggesting that they can select a maximum of 10 artifacts, which we have defined as the summative assessments they've submitted over the course of their program, but also saying that they can achieve top marks if they showcase even 5 pieces of work. And we're kind of expressing or operationalizing top marks here as kind of your suitability for the position. So we're trying to make this kind of a really real world experience for them. And then also within the Showcase portfolio, the aim is that they kind of reflect on those artifacts. So they think about, how could they potentially have reworked those artifacts if they wanted to, without being too self-criticizing. But the idea is, what could they have done to edit those in some way or rework them to demonstrate the kind of reflective process of that. And then also kind of showing direction, right? So demonstrating how they can set up a rationale that really explains why they've chosen those artifacts. Really importantly, as Chris said, they've done a variety of different assessments, and we really want for them to emphasize that they can draw on written pieces, they've got podcasts or audio pieces, any sort of visual pieces they've done, and then the Showcase itself is fully digital, right? So it's all going to be online for them. In terms of the submission for this, so the idea is that for their formatives, as Chris said, the formatives are kind of informing the integrated summative work here. For the formative for a Showcase, they submit a plan, right? Selecting which artifacts they'd like to demonstrate and what kind of rationale they've been thinking of. And then for the summative, they submit a snapshot of their Showcase portfolio. The reason being is that we want them to obviously to keep this as a live piece that they can then move forward. Once they leave us as graduates, they see how they can use the Showcase portfolio as a working piece when they go out and look for further study or job opportunities, that really see that as a valuable resource that they can draw on. So that's the Showcase portfolio. Can you change the slide, Chris, for me? Thank you. And then the simulation. So as I said, the idea is that the Showcase portfolio, they're applying for a position. And then to start off the simulation, this is going to be a full day, a roughly 8 hours conference style simulation for them. So the students will turn up, and the idea is that just before that, they've received a letter of appointment. They've been appointed to this fictitious organization. They've been appointed to a team, and they're given some tasks to do. So they'll have some work that they can, some kind of preparatory work that they can do ahead of the simulation event. And then they come along to the event for the day. the idea is that they will be preparing a picture or presentation in some way. As Chris said, we're still working out all of the details on this. This is the general idea. And throughout the day, they will be presented with a number of play cards from staff who will be very much in character. And the idea is that these play cards will switch up the situation for them. And so they will have to adapt their preparations according to the play card. As I said then, ahead of time, they're given their appointment letter and various information that they can use to prepare for that simulation day, as well as things like an agenda. So they have to have their pre-simulation meetings in order to prepare, and they need to keep minutes, and they're going to go towards their formative for this. So quite a lot going on in the simulation event. But the idea is that we're really trying to create a piece that is very reflective of a real world scenario for them. So we're trying as much as we can to do a mock-up of them applying for a job, securing a position, and then diving straight into the work. And this is all going to be digital as well. So the idea is that we're going to work really closely even for the simulation. We've had lots of conversations with Athena and Owen already, and with Jenny, lots of input on how we're going to integrate all of this information into Moodle. We're going to need things, that Moodle access, for example, that's both at an individual level, at group levels when they work in their teams, and also cohort level, and how we're going to design all of that. So there's still a lot to be done in preparing for both of these. And then can I have the next slide, Chris? And yeah, so just kind of back to this, as Chris spoke to the idea that we see this as two assessments that combine to make one piece of work. So the assessments are really building on each other. And the kind of common theme across here is this idea of reflecting, and the students then being able to apply the theory that they've learned throughout their program to real world issues. So it's not that kind of ivory tower idea, but we're actually getting them to really think about the real issues and applying the real world skills that hopefully they've acquired through their time with us. Can I have the next slide, Chris? I think we'll both briefly speak to some of the challenges ahead, because it's certainly, there's still a huge amount to do. So in things of getting all the materials ready, designing everything. I think one thing we're really kind of conscious of is making this as realistic as possible. We don't want the simulation to fall flat, and that relies on having a very good showcase portfolio experience for the students and a really good design of the simulation event as well. Chris, do you want to speak to any of the logistics, bringing in the kind of PSS perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to recognise that there are some challenges behind this that are numerous. We're using a novel assessment here, so unless we mock something up, we haven't got example work for students to look back on and see what might be good or bad examples of working. We need a huge amount of technological support. Thankfully, that's coming from the guys in Eden Digital. We need to make sure we've got something that logistically we can mark, hence the kind of the concept around the snapshot and that sort of thing. We need to make sure assessment criteria are really clear with this kind of novel assessment. We know that's going to be the thing that students will ask us. And as Miriam said, there's a lot to do. But we think this is a really exciting way to kind of finish off our program.
Yeah, and I think also we have got a lot of great examples from across the school to draw on, both from input from obviously Dilly championing the showcase portfolios, and also really great examples from across the school on simulations. So I think it's about integrating all of that expertise and working really closely with Eden Digital to kind of get it off the ground. And I know it's seen Claire's comment that we're running out of time, so I'll just wrap up the ending then on the last slide, Chris, just to say, yeah, that it's very much a work in progress. There's a lot to do. There's not really any assessments in Michaelmas term, so this is all happening Lent term and summer term for our students. So they are just having learning in Michaelmas term, which is nice for them.
Thank you. That was so inspiring. It was great to hear the way you've integrated the formative piece of assessment, the showcase portfolio, the simulations, and as you say, learned from colleagues across the school around simulations. I'm sure that's lots of good work coming out of Jenny Carr's simulation special interest group. It's great to see that practice being shared across the school. And listen, there's some really good questions in the chat. Chris and Miriam, I wonder if you could respond to them in the chat. And in the meantime, we'll hand over to Alex Spiers from the Eden Centre, who's going to talk about Moodle boards and Biscuits for assessment. And we will be recording this, and we may have to think of another way of sharing also your practice, Alex, because I suspect we're going to we are going to go beyond 5 o'clock, so apologies everybody, but if you can stay for a few more minutes, I think it will be worth it.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go beyond 5 o'clock, unfortunately. So hopefully, it's always the case whenever I turn up, you know it's the end of something. So I'm going to quickly go to share my screen. And I want to tell you about a fantastic little project that the Eden Digital team was involved with the other side of Eden, the academic developers, on September. It was led by Mark Baltovich, who's been running the introduction to GTAs for a number of years. And this year in particular, because of reflections on what happened in the previous year, with lots of assessment being online, it was felt and agreed that we should have a much more of a stronger presence in terms of Moodle and the use of assignments, and making sure that our GTAs actually got some hands-on experience in understanding how to use Moodle, as well as getting the kind of pedagogical knowledge, which is delivered by kind of like Mark and Laura, and that is part of it. So we thought we'd take a playful approach, and everyone loves a biscuit, and obviously I'm contractually obliged to mention tonics at this point because I am Scottish. So we implemented the biscuit game, which is widely recognized as kind of like playful pedagogy, and basically it introduces staff and students to the idea of creating criteria and marking to particular standards and principles. Okay, what we did, which was slightly different, is that we used Moodle to do that. Okay, so let me just move all of you there. And we have set up this Moodle site where we enrolled all our students, and part of the activity, we asked them to follow these steps. So basically, we're asking them to download a paper and consider some of the criteria and standards that they would use to communicate and provide feedback on a range of biscuits. Okay. All very simple and so far, and let's have a quick look at the biscuits. There you go. Oh, they look lovely, don't they? So there's lots of different criteria and approaches that we can do with that. This was an individual activity and had to be done in that way. Next, they had to kind of like write up some feedback and then submit it as a student in this Moodle course. And you can see that submission area there. Following that, we ask them to kind of like think about the different criteria that they would be assessing on. And by flicking a magic switch, we allowed the students who are enrolled, the GTAs, to become staff and ask them to engage in one of the new pieces of technology that we've got integrated into Moodle is the Moodle board, hence the title of this presentation. And this has been developed by colleagues at DCU. And one of the reasons for its existence is that there are a lot of tools out there that are less accessible and less inclusive. And this is a tool that allows people to engage in a Padlet style way using text and audio and video, but actually has accessibility built in and baked into the tool. So we can see that this is an example here. We've got the students and they've provided a range of criteria. They've thought about the different standards and how they're going to evaluate these biscuits. So we've got things like dunkability, texture, the eating experience and crunchiness. And what we found was that the students really engaged with this, not just the tool, as you can see, there's lots of kind of like commentary and feedback here, but also kind of played around with the notions and ideas of developing feedback and how to provide it and actually really interrogating it. So I've got some examples of some of the feedback that we provided. So you can see that the markers use the rubric and they thought about kind of like analysis of texture with respect to taste and freshness, and actually kind of like considering areas and elements of this that we wouldn't have necessarily recognised at the outset. So you can see they're also kind of like suggesting that feed forward element as well by providing extra information in that feedback. And this really demonstrates how much some of the students were actually engaged in this activity. We've also got kind of like pointers for underused resources. So, and identifying kind of like different things there. And you can see in this example, there is a kind of a mixture of really positive feedback, but also some sort of like negative elements as well. And the feedback sandwich is kind of like prevalent there. And finally, there was some unexpected elements. So you can see that we've got kind of like a number of different biscuits here. And really this particular response where the student was interrogating the question and pushing back on this. So that's a very quick overview of using Moodle and Moodle board to support and encourage engagement online in an open and accessible way. And I think it also relates to what some people were talking about earlier, is that how you can bring that technology piece into the classroom. This is something, this is an activity that could be done in a classroom space as well. So I'm going to leave it there because I realise that we're 5 minutes over. If you do want any more information about how this tool has been used, because it is relatively new, then please do get in touch with myself or any of the team in Eden Digital. And that's me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Alex. That was great. Liked your selection of biscuits in particular, but I think that was fantastic. It's great to hear about the sort of new functionality of Moodle, which is coming in all the time. And colleagues, anything that you've heard about this afternoon, or when you look at the videos too and you'd like to find out more, get in touch with the colleagues that have presented or get in touch with the Eden Centre, and we'd be very happy to point you in the right direction or discuss possible changes, innovations, improvements to your teaching practice.